Hello, third grade. It's time for a math lesson, and today we will be talking about plane figures. Now, as you look at my paper, you might say, yeah, Mrs. Smith, they are looking a bit plain, but we're not talking about that type of plane. You're probably thinking ordinary, run-of-the-mill, not special. No, if you look up here, I'm not talking about that kind of plane. I'm talking about plane figures that are flat. Okay, so a little bit different. And you might say, okay, well, so they're plane figures. But Mrs. Smith, I've seen these shapes before. As a matter of fact, Mrs. McMahon taught me everything I need to know in kindergarten about each one of these shapes. I can tell you what each one of them is, and I'm sure you can. But now that you're in third grade, we're going to expand your knowledge in terms of geometry, these shapes and their characteristics. So just hold on for a little bit. We're going to just add a little bit more to what you already know about these shapes, okay? All right, so I know you know the name of them, but let's talk specifically about their characteristics. All right, the first one is a square. Now, well, actually, let me go back. For all of these shapes, we're going to talk about them, talk about their characteristics in terms of angles and line segments. Now, last week you learned what a line segment is. A line segment is a line that has a beginning and an end. It begins, it ends, you can measure it so that if I have a ruler, I can measure these shapes. A line, on the other hand, that has an arrowhead on either side, it goes on forever from left to right, north to south, up and down, whichever way. But these are line segments. And then we're also going to be talking about angles. Angles are where those two line segments meet. Okay? All right, so let's get down to it. All right, the first one is a square. Yes, I know you know what this is. But a square, by definition, has four right angles. Now, last week you learned about angles. Again, that's where two line segments meet, but a right angle is a very special angle in that it measures exactly 90 degrees. Okay, and when I say 90 degrees, I want you to think of the corner of a door or a corner of a window. Okay, or think of the letter L. Okay, the letter L, capital letter L, where it meets makes a right angle. Well, square has four of these. We see one here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. It has four right angles. That means that if I took a protractor to it, it would measure exactly 90 degrees. It also has four equal line segments. So if I was to take my ruler and measure the two sides, the top and the bottom, they would all have the same measurement. Okay, so a square, four right angles, four equal line segments. Very important. All right, the next one. Yes, it is a rectangle. All right, what are the characteristics of a rectangle? Rectangle also has four right angles. Okay, so if you look at these corners, I could take a letter L and I could see it in each corner, four right angles. But the line segments aren't equal. As you can see here, I have a line segment on the top and the bottom that are shorter than the line segments here on the left and the right. Okay, so that's unique to a rectangle, that it has four line segments, but it doesn't always have, but the line segments, the pairs aren't always the same. For a square, they always have to be the same. All four sides are exactly the same. And then this shape right here, our triangle. Now you might say, but Mrs. Smith, my triangle looks a little bit taller. Yes, but a triangle, there's actually several different types of triangles. This one is a little bit squatty, okay? Yours is taller, but it's a triangle nonetheless because it has these characteristics. It has three angles. 1, 2, 3. And then it has three line segments. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. All right, so any shape that has three angles, three line segments, it's a triangle. All right, now this shape right here, fancy name, is called a rhombus. A rhombus has four angles as well, 1, 2, 3, 4, and four line segments, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, something that might interest you is if you take a rhombus and you turn it this way, it might look like a diamond or a kite, okay? But if you turn it on its side, again, a rhombus, ooh, wait a minute, there you go. A rhombus looks like a square that someone shoved, okay? Maybe shoved it over on its side, okay? So it looks similar to a square, except for it's pushed off to one side. And then this last shape right here is a circle, of course. Now, circle is very special in that it has no angles, because do you see where any line segments come together? And the reason why you don't see any line segments come together is because there are no line segments. Okay, so the circle is a special shape out of all of these in that it has no angles, no line segments at all. All right, speaking of that, okay, if we look into our packet, it says shapes, all of these shapes above are called plane figures. They are flat, closed figures that begin and end at the same point. In other words, when I say that it's a closed figure, if I was to take my marker, I could start drawing it to the side, go up, down, and I'm done. Same thing with the rectangle and all these others. They're closed shapes. A closed figure with straight sides is called a polygon. Now maybe you recognize poly. Poly means many, okay, or at least more than one. So all of these have more than one side, and so we call them polygons. Which would mean, I wonder if a circle would be considered a polygon, seeing as it doesn't have any sides. Might be something to look up. It says an open figure has both a starting point and an ending point. So all of these are closed. An open figure has a beginning and an end. If you look at the picture there, you can see the closed looks like a cloud, okay? Someone took a pencil, they started drawing, and they came right back to where they started. Whereas the open figure, someone started drawing and maybe they got distracted, got up and left, and they didn't finish it. There's an opening to the shape, which makes sense that they call it an open figure. All right, so let's take a look at those examples that they have on there. They want you to write the names of the plane figures you see in each picture. All right, and then put an X on the polygons. So we have the picture of the cow in front of the mountains. All right, what polygon do you see in that picture? Well, if you said you saw a triangle, yes, of course. That mountain that's in the front, that's in the background, looks very much like a triangle. All right, for number 2, it's a picture of, I'm not sure if that's a barn door. No, I think it's a door that's covering a window. What shape would you say would represent that window? I would say a rectangle. Yeah, a rectangle. And then that last one, the face of the clock, of course, our circle. Now, 2 of these are polygons, and one of them is not. Now, remember that question that I asked you earlier, just a few moments ago, about the circle? Is a circle a polygon by definition? No. We would say that the triangle, yes, we should put an X on it because it is a polygon, and we will put an X on the picture of the door or the window because it's a polygon as well. But the circle is not. We would have to leave it blank because it has no angles, it has no line segments, so it's not a polygon. All right. Okay, now you were told on the bottom, you were told to look around your classroom. Of course, we're not in our classroom, so I want you to go around your house and see if you can find some plane figures. I went around my house, and this is what I found. I found a magnet, okay, that was on my refrigerator. Oops, might be a little bit too bright. I'll bring it back here. Okay, and it's an example of a circle. Oh, here is another example. This is a recipe card. It would be an example of what type of polygon? Because it can be tall, or it can be short, it has to be a rectangle. Because a rectangle has 2 sets of lines, a set of lines that are the same. So these 2 on the sides are exactly the same. The top and the bottom are the same. Rectangle. I found another. This one was fun. Maybe you recognize him. It's my Oreo man. At class, I'm still here. Mrs. Smith didn't need me. Okay, so obviously this is an example of a circle. Yes, I didn't have the heart to throw him away, and you don't have to worry about it. I'm not tempted to eat him either because he's pretty stale. All right. Okay, if you were to flip over to the next page, it says to count the shapes and write the numbers in color according to the key. All right, so, I made a copy myself, okay, of this drawing, some kind of geometric art, and we have to see if we can catch them all. All right, they want us to find all the squares and to color them red. All right, so mine's pretty much the same. Where do you see squares? I see one here. Okay, I'm not going to color mine in. That'll take too long. There's a square. Here's a square right here. Here's a square right here. And here's another square. All right, so how many squares did you find? I found 4. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, the next one is rectangles. All right, now remember, rectangle, it has 4 line segments as well, 4 right angles, but the line segments, all 4 of them aren't the same. You can have 2 are the same and 2 that are different, okay? With a square, all the line segments are exactly the same measurement. So, rectangles. Here's one right here. Oh, I might try to just color them in. Okay, here's a rectangle right there. Here's another one. So that's 2. Oh, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, so 8. All right, for the rectangles. All right, for our triangles. All right, how many triangles are we finding now? Be careful. I see one right here. You see it right here? Here's a rectangle. So that's 1. Here's 1, 2. Here's another one. 3, 4. Oh, big one's 4. Here's 5. You see that? 5. And then 6. Yeah, those triangles were a little bit tricky. All right, so 6 triangles. All right, and then we need to find our circles. Okay, I think this one might be the easiest one. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. You know what? I just thought of something. For our rectangles, we could argue that not only are there 8, but you could say there's 9. Where, Mrs. Smith? I don't see 9. 9. The whole shape itself is a rectangle. All right. I don't think they were wanting us to count it, but all right, nonetheless. Okay. All right. Now, I also wanted to talk to you about the next lesson. So just for a moment, because you'll be going back and you'll be completing the rest of the exercise on your own. But on page 217, the next lesson is over congruent figures. It's like Ruka, what? Congruent figures. All right, just very simply at the very top, it says these 2 triangles are the same shape and the same size. Now remember earlier in the lesson when I was talking about plane figures, and I had mentioned how my triangle was a little bit different than the one that was in your book, but they were still triangles. Well, again, my triangle is short and wide, whereas the triangle in your book was taller, okay? Well, they're both triangles, but we would say they are not congruent. They aren't exactly the same size, and they're the same shape, but the type of triangles that they aren't the same. But the 2 triangles that we see here are exactly the same. They're the same shape and the same size, so we say that they are congruent. It says that the triangles can be turned in any direction, and turning will not change their size or shape. So congruent, when you hear the word congruent, I want you to think of identical twins. They're exactly the same in every way that you can imagine. So let's look at, we have a couple of pictures, and it says, are these Lepenizer horses congruent? Now, at first, I was really looking because, well, they look like they're congruent, but I'm looking at the one towards the back. His belly's a little bit bigger. So I wouldn't say that they were congruent. They're not identical or exactly the same. What about those flags? Now I know the picture that's on the flags are different, but looking at the shape of the flags, well, yes, they're both rectangles, so they are congruent. They're the same shape, they're the same size. Oh, what about this? I got one of my favorite things. Take a look at this. And this. These are two of my favorite teacups. Aren't they pretty? I love to use them. It's like for my special time. They are congruent, we would say. They're the same shape. Let's see if I turn this one around. Okay, I gotta be careful. Yeah, I turn them so the handles are both the same, pointing the same direction. You can see they're exactly the same. So we would say that these are congruent as well. All right, so congruent means exactly the same. So let's take a look at number 1. We have 2 triangles there. Yeah, they're both triangles because they both have 3 sides, 3 angles. But are they the same size? They're the same shape, but the same size? Well, no. One of those triangles is really long. It looks like a slice of pizza. Okay, whereas the other one looks like a Dorito. Okay, so no, they're not exactly the same. They're not congruent. What about for number 2? We have 2 squares, or you could say 2 rhombus. I don't know, depending on the way that you're looking at them. Are they congruent? Well, here, let's ask. Are they both the same shape? Well, yes. Like I said, we could say that they're either 2 squares or 2 rhombuses. Are they the same size? That would be a yes again. So they are congruent. And what about number 3? Okay, remember the test is, are they the same shape? Yes, they're both circles. Are the circles the same size? Well, yes. Okay, so yes, they are congruent. And then for number 4, all right, remember our test is they have to be the same shape, the same size. We have 2 squares. Okay, so they're the same shape. Are they the same size? No, one is slightly smaller than the other, so they're not congruent. Okay, so again, when I say congruent, I want you to think of the word identical twins. They're exactly the same shape, same size. All right, so let's just go over these just to think through and make sure that we understand what congruent means. All right, we're to answer yes or no. Would 2 pine trees be congruent? Well, they would both have the green leaves or green needles on them, but well, one pine tree may be taller, the other one may be shorter. So, well, no, we're going to say no, they're not congruent. What about 2 pages of this book? Okay, now remember, we're talking about the size and the shape. They both would be rectangles because that's the shape of our pages in our book, and they would be the same size. So, yes, they would be congruent. What about 2 mountain goats? Okay, they would both be mountain goats, but they could be different sizes. So, no, they can't be congruent. What about 2 tulips? The same issue, isn't it? They're both tulips, but they could be 2 different sizes. So, no, they wouldn't be congruent. What about 2 third graders? Well, no, they cannot be congruent because each one of my third graders is unique and special in their own way. So, no, they can never be congruent because God has made you each unique and special. All right, so what about number 10, 2 dimes? They're both circles. They both have the same stamp. Yes, they have to be identical because if your dime looks slightly different, then you might have a counterfeit. And that's a big problem. So yes, 2 dimes would be congruent. So again, when you hear the word congruent, the idea is the same shape, the same size. Okay? All right, well, that's all that I have for the lesson today, but what I want you to do is going back to page 231, you're just going to review the number of angles, the number of line segments for each of the polygons, and then you're going to draw 2 shapes. They're asking you to, 2 different sizes, and then you'll be completing the review exercise in the Google form that I've attached to today's lesson, and then completing, yes, page 218. Again, you're going to be answering whether or not the shapes are congruent or not. Okay? All right. Well, I will look forward to seeing some of you later on today. Unless you're working on this later, and then seeing everybody later on as we're practicing getting ready for our English test as well as our history. All right, until then, third graders, you keep on working hard so that later on we can play hard. All right, see you later.